The old piano sat in the corner of the living room, gathering dust most days. It had belonged to their grandmother, a cherished family heirloom that nobody really played anymore. The house wasn't big, just a simple two-bedroom on the outskirts of town, but it was filled with love, laughter, and now, unexpectedly, music. Nobody noticed when little Ethan, just 4 years old with unruly brown hair and curious eyes, first climbed onto the piano bench. His small fingers pressed randomly at the keys, delighting in the sounds that emerged. His older brother Liam, 7 years old and usually more interested in building blocks and toy cars, soon joined him. What began as simple play quickly turned into something else entirely. Their mom, May, worked long hours as a nurse at the local hospital, often coming home tired but always with a warm smile for her boys. Their dad, Robert, worked construction, his hands rough from labor but gentle when he ruffled the boys' hair or helped them with homework. Neither parent had any musical background. The piano had simply been too precious to give away after Grandmother Rose passed. "I heard someone playing," May said one evening, setting down her bag by the door. She'd worked a double shift and had expected to come home to the usual chaos of toys scattered across the floor. Instead, she found both boys at the piano completely absorbed. "Listen to this, Mom," Liam said, his small hands positioning themselves on the keys with surprising confidence. He played a simple melody, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," but with a steadiness that made May's eyes widen. "Who taught you that?" she asked, looking around as if expecting to find a music teacher hiding behind the couch. Liam shrugged. "I heard it on TV and figured it out. My turn." Ethan bounced on the bench, barely able to reach the keys. Yet when he played, the notes flowed with a natural rhythm that seemed impossible for a child who still needed help tying his shoes. Robert came in from the backyard, wiping sweat from his brow. He'd been fixing the fence after work. "What's going on in here?" "The boys," May said, her voice soft with wonder. "They're playing. Really playing." In the days that followed, Liam and Ethan spent less time with their toys and more time at the piano. They didn't fight over it like they did with their other toys. Instead, they took turns or played together, figuring out duets without knowing that's what they were doing. "Should we get them lessons?" Robert asked one night after the boys had gone to bed. He and May sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out before them. The household budget was already tight. May sighed, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know if we can afford it right now. Piano teachers aren't cheap." "Maybe next year if they're still interested," Robert agreed, though both parents secretly wondered if this was just a passing phase. After all, children often jumped from one interest to another, but the boys didn't lose interest. If anything, their fascination grew. Liam started watching online tutorials on an old tablet, teaching himself proper finger positions. Ethan couldn't follow the instructions as well, but he had an uncanny ability to play by ear. If he heard a song once, his fingers could find the notes, though his technique was all his own. Their big sister Abby, a teenager usually lost in her own world of friends and school, even started to take notice. "They're actually pretty good," she admitted one weekend, watching her little brothers play a simplified version of a pop song they'd heard on the radio. "Like weird good for kids their age." The neighbors noticed too. Mrs. Chen, next door, often heard the music through the open windows in spring and commented on it when she saw me in the yard. "Your boys have a gift," she said, helping May hang laundry on the line. "My daughter took lessons for 8 years and couldn't play with that much feeling." May smiled, proud but also unsure. "What did you do with a gift you couldn't afford to nurture?" The answer came from an unexpected place. The boys' kindergarten teacher, Miss Thompson, called May one afternoon. May's heart raced. Calls from school usually meant trouble. "Mrs. Wilson," Miss Thompson said, "I need to tell you about something amazing that happened today." During free time, Liam had wandered to the old upright piano in the corner of the classroom, an instrument mainly used during sing-alongs. Before long, he was playing a melody that had Miss Thompson stopping in her tracks. The other children gathered around him, completely mesmerized, she explained. Then he told me his little brother could play even better. Miss Thompson had a suggestion. Her own mother had been a piano teacher before retiring. She lived just a few blocks from their home and might be willing to give the boys some basic lessons. "She misses teaching," Miss Thompson explained. "And from what I saw today, your sons have something special that shouldn't go untapped." That Sunday, the family visited Mrs. Thompson, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her living room was dominated by a beautiful grand piano, the kind May and Robert could never afford. "Play something for me," Mrs. Thompson said gently, helping Ethan onto the bench while Liam waited his turn. The boys were shy at first, intimidated by the formal setting and the magnificent instrument. But soon their natural curiosity overcame their nervousness. Ethan played a nursery rhyme he'd learned, his tiny fingers stretching to reach the keys. Liam followed with a more complex tune he'd been working on at home. Mrs. Thompson didn't speak for a long moment after they finished. When she did, her voice was filled with emotion. "In 40 years of teaching, I've rarely seen such natural ability," she said, "especially in children so young." "We can't afford proper lessons right now," Robert admitted, his face flushed with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Mrs. Thompson waved away his concern. "I'm retired with too much time on my hands. Let me teach them for the joy of it. We can discuss proper payment when your situation changes." And so began the boys' formal introduction to music. Twice a week after school, May would drop them at Mrs. Thompson's house for an hour of instruction. The elderly teacher was patient, but also pushed them to develop proper technique to complement their natural abilities. "Liam has remarkable precision," she told May after a month of lessons. "His brain understands the mathematical structure of music. And Ethan," she shook her head in wonder, "that child plays from his heart. He feels music in a way that can't be taught." At home, the old piano came alive. What had been Grandmother Rose's quiet companion was now the center of family life. Robert oiled its hinges and tightened loose screws. May dusted it daily and placed family photos on top. Even Abby would sometimes sit with her brothers, showing them songs she liked. The boys' progress was remarkable. By the end of 3 months, they were playing pieces that Mrs. Thompson usually reserved for students with years of training. Their small hands sometimes struggled with the reach required for certain chords, but they found workarounds, adapting pieces to suit their abilities. "They don't approach obstacles like most children," Mrs. Thompson observed. "Where others might give up, they see puzzles to solve." Life wasn't all about piano, of course. Liam still loved building elaborate structures with his blocks, and Ethan could spend hours chasing butterflies in the backyard. They had friends in the neighborhood, enjoyed ice cream on hot days, and sometimes fought over whose turn it was to feed the family's aging cat, Pepper. But music had become their special language, a way of expressing themselves that went beyond words. Sometimes when they thought no one was listening, they'd make up their own songs, simple melodies that captured the wonder of childhood. One evening, as winter turned to spring, Mrs. Thompson called with an exciting proposition. The community center was organizing a talent show to raise money for the local food bank. Would the boys be interested in performing? She asked. May covered the phone and relayed the question. Liam's eyes grew wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. Ethan, too young to fully understand the implications, simply clapped his hands. "I think that's a yes," May told Mrs. Thompson, though privately she worried about how her shy boys would handle performing for a crowd. Over dinner that night, the family discussed what song the boys might play. It needed to be something they could perform together, something meaningful. "What about that song Grandma Rose used to sing?" Abby suggested. "The one about the world being wonderful?" "What a wonderful world." Robert nodded, remembering how Rose would hum it while baking cookies with the boys. "It's perfect." And so a new chapter began. Mrs. Thompson helped arrange a simplified version of the classic song as a duet. The boys practiced with renewed purpose, no longer just playing for the joy of discovery, but preparing to share their gift with others. None of them could have predicted how that simple decision would change their lives. In their modest home, with an inherited piano and borrowed knowledge, 2 young brothers were about to start a journey that would lead them far beyond the boundaries of their small town. But for now, they were simply Liam and Ethan, 7 and 4 years old, making music that seemed to come from somewhere deep within their souls. The kitchen calendar now had a big red circle around May 15th. "Talent Show" was written in Robert's neat handwriting, with a small drawing of a piano that Ethan had added. 6 weeks seemed both too long to wait and too short to prepare, especially for 2 young boys who had never performed in front of an audience larger than their family and Mrs. Thompson. "Remember, it's just like playing at home," Mrs. Thompson told them during their next lesson. You're sharing something beautiful with people who want to hear it. But Liam wasn't convinced. At 7 years old, he was becoming more aware of what others thought. During their practice sessions, he would stop whenever he made a mistake, his small face tightening with frustration. "Nobody will like it if I mess up," he said one afternoon, his fingers hovering nervously over the keys. Mrs. Thompson placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Music isn't about being perfect, dear. It's about how it makes people feel." Ethan, still blissfully unaware of performance pressure at just 4, nodded in agreement. "It makes me feel like flying," he said, spreading his arms wide and spinning around the room. Their lessons took on a new focus. Beyond just learning the notes and timing, Mrs. Thompson worked with them on performing as a team. Liam would handle the more complex parts of the melody, while Ethan would support with simpler complementary notes. Together they created something more beautiful than either could alone. "It's like you're having a conversation through music," Mrs. Thompson explained. "You need to listen to each other, not just play your own parts." At home, the practice continued. The family rearranged the living room furniture to create a makeshift stage area. Kitchen chairs became audience seating, and even Pepper the cat was sometimes dressed with a little bow tie as a special guest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Abby would announce, using a hairbrush as a microphone, "please welcome the amazing Wilson brothers." These pretend concerts helped Liam grow more comfortable with the idea of performing. Sometimes neighbors or friends would be invited to these home recitals, gradually increasing the size of their audience. The boys learned to bow at the beginning and end, to smile at their listeners, and to keep going even if they made small mistakes. But preparing for the talent show wasn't always smooth. About a month before the big day, Ethan caught a cold that kept him from practicing for nearly a week. His little fingers seemed to forget some of the movements they had mastered, and he grew tearful with frustration. "I can't do it anymore," he sniffled one evening, climbing down from the piano bench and curling up on the couch. Liam, usually the more cautious brother, surprised everyone by sitting next to Ethan and putting an arm around his shoulders. "Yes, you can," he said with unexpected firmness. "We're doing this together, remember?" The family watched in amazement as the older brother patiently guided the younger back to the piano. Liam broke down their duet into tiny sections, working with Ethan on just a few notes at a time. By bedtime, Ethan was playing again, his confidence slowly returning. Meanwhile, the old piano itself presented another challenge. As spring brought more humid weather, some of the keys began to stick, and certain notes sounded slightly off-key. "We should get it tuned before the show," May suggested. But when they called the nearest piano tuner, the quote made her wince. It was more than they could spare that month, especially with Robert's work hours being cut back temporarily. Never one to give up easily, Robert spent his evenings watching online videos about basic piano maintenance. With careful hands more used to hammer and nails than delicate piano strings, he learned to fix the sticking keys and make minor adjustments to the tuning. "It's not perfect," he admitted after several nights of work, "but it should get us through until we can afford a professional." The boys didn't seem to mind. They adapted to the piano's quirks, working around the occasional sticking key or slightly flat note. In fact, these imperfections became part of their unique sound, a reminder that beautiful music could come from unexpected places. As the weeks passed, what a wonderful world transformed under their small fingers. Mrs. Thompson had cleverly arranged it to highlight both boys' strengths. Liam handled the main melody with his precise, careful playing, while Ethan added emotional flourishes that somehow captured the song's hopeful spirit, despite his limited technical skills. "The way you boys play together," Mrs. Thompson said during one of their final lessons before the show, "it tells a story. Not just the song's story, but yours too. How you support each other, how you're different but complementary." The boys didn't fully understand what she meant, but they felt it when they played. There was something magical in the way their separate parts created a whole greater than the sum of its parts. 2 weeks before the talent show, Mrs. Thompson suggested they practice in the actual venue. The community center was much larger than her living room, with high ceilings and wooden floors that made sounds echo slightly. The stage seemed enormous to the boys, and the piano there was different from both their home piano and Mrs. Thompson's grand. "It's so big," Ethan whispered, looking out at the empty chairs that would soon hold hundreds of people. Liam nodded, suddenly pale. "I don't think I can do this." Mrs. Thompson had anticipated this reaction. She had brought along a small photo album filled with pictures of successful concerts she had organized over her decades of teaching. "See these children?" she said, showing them photos of young performers. "They all felt exactly the way you do now. And look at their faces after they finished playing." The photos showed children beaming with pride, some holding small trophies or certificates, others simply glowing with accomplishment. "That feeling," Mrs. Thompson told them, "is worth pushing through the fear." They spent over an hour in the community center, getting comfortable with the space and the different piano. By the end of the session, the boys were racing each other across the stage, their earlier nervousness forgotten as they explored this exciting new space. Back at home, their practice sessions took on a new seriousness. Even Ethan, usually bouncing with endless energy, would sit still for longer periods working to perfect his part. Liam created a practice chart with stickers to track their progress, filling the kitchen wall with colorful stars, marking each successful run-through. The family pitched in however they could. May sewed simple matching outfits, black pants and white shirts with small bow ties that made the boys look older than their years. Robert recorded their practice sessions on his phone so they could listen and identify areas that needed work. Abby helped them memorize the music so they wouldn't need to look at sheets while performing. "What if people laugh at us because we're just kids?" Liam asked one night as May tucked him into bed. "They might smile because you're young," she said carefully. "But once you start playing, they'll forget about your age. They'll just hear the beautiful music." The night before the talent show, a small crisis erupted. While practicing one last time, a string inside the old piano snapped with a jarring twang that made everyone jump. The note was one that Liam needed for several important moments in the song. "We'll have to cancel," Robert said, his face falling as he examined the broken string. "No," both boys cried in unison, their weeks of preparation making the thought of not performing unbearable. Mrs. Thompson, who had come over for a final coaching session, had a solution. "You'll need to adapt," she told Liam. "We can modify those measures to use a different note that sounds similar." For the next 2 hours, they reworked those sections of the music. It wasn't ideal, but it would work. This last-minute challenge actually helped distract the boys from their nervousness about the next day. That night, the house was unusually quiet. Ethan fell asleep, clutching his bow tie, while Liam lay awake longer, mentally playing through the song again and again. In their parents' room, May and Robert talked softly about how much the boys had grown through this experience, regardless of how the performance turned out. "Remember when we thought the piano was just gathering dust?" Robert laughed softly. "Now it's the heart of our home." Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Breakfast was barely touched as butterflies filled small stomachs. Hair was carefully combed, shoes polished, and bow ties straightened multiple times. Mrs. Thompson arrived to drive with them to the community center, bringing small gifts for the boys, matching handkerchiefs with their initials embroidered in the corners. "A tradition among performers," she explained. "Something to help you remember this day." The community center parking lot was already filling when they arrived. The talent show featured 20 acts, from teenage dance groups to a local poet to an elderly man who played spoons. The Wilson brothers were scheduled near the middle of the program. Backstage was a buzz of activity. The boys watched wide-eyed as other performers prepared, some stretching, others practicing quietly in corners. A high school rock band with electric guitars and colorful hair made Ethan giggle with delight, while a group of ballet dancers in sparkly tutus had Liam staring in wonder. 15 minutes until showtime, called the event coordinator, a busy woman with a clipboard and a kind smile for the nervous young pianists. As the audience filed in and the first performers took the stage, Liam and Ethan waited in the wings. Through a small gap in the curtain, they could see the crowd, far larger than they had imagined. Parents, grandparents, neighbors, teachers, and many people they didn't know at all had come to watch the show. "Are you scared?" Ethan whispered to his brother, his small hand reaching out. Liam nodded honestly, then squeezed his brother's hand. "But we're doing this together, right?" "Together," Ethan agreed with a solemn nod. The minutes ticked by until finally they heard the announcement they'd been both dreading and looking forward to for weeks. "Next up, please welcome Liam and Ethan Wilson, ages 7 and 4, performing What a Wonderful World on piano." The applause for the previous act, a group of 5th graders performing a science-themed rap, was still echoing through the Community center as Liam and Ethan stepped onto the stage. The spotlight felt warm and strangely comforting as they made their way to the piano, their small dress shoes clicking against the wooden floor. The piano bench seemed higher than they remembered from their practice session. Ethan, at 4 years old and small for his age, needed help climbing up. Liam boosted his little brother first, then scrambled up beside him, both boys adjusting their positions with a seriousness that made some audience members smile fondly. The host of the show, Mr. Rivera, who taught music at the local high school, had to lower the microphone dramatically to reach their level. "Tell us a little about what you'll be playing today," he prompted gently. Liam leaned toward the microphone, his voice coming out higher than usual with nervousness. "We're playing What a Wonderful World. Our grandma used to sing it to us. And she's in heaven now," Ethan added unexpectedly, his small voice carrying clearly across the hushed auditorium. A collective awe rippled through the crowd. "Well, I'm sure she's listening," Mr. Rivera said kindly. "Whenever you're ready, boys." The brothers looked at each other, exchanging a silent message the way they often did before playing together. Liam counted softly. 1, 2, 3, and their fingers found the keys. The opening notes were hesitant, Liam's hands trembling slightly. In the front row, May held her breath while beside her. Robert gripped the armrest of his chair. Mrs. Thompson, seated a few rows back, leaned forward, her lips moving silently with the rhythm of the music as if sending her support across the distance. For a moment, it seemed the performance might falter before it truly began. Then Ethan, with the unworried confidence of a child too young to understand stage fright, played his part with perfect timing. The simple, clear notes seemed to steady his brother. Liam's shoulders relaxed and his playing grew stronger. The melody of What a Wonderful World began to fill the space, transformed by the brothers' unique arrangement. Where the original was rich and deep, their version had a lightness to it, a childlike wonder that perfectly captured the song's essence. Liam handled the main melody with growing confidence, while Ethan added unexpected flourishes that made the familiar tune sound fresh. In the audience, people who had been shuffling programs or checking phones grew still. The sight of two small boys creating such beautiful music was captivating in itself. But there was something more, an emotional quality to their playing that seemed to touch everyone in the room. Halfway through the song, they reached a part they had practiced dozens of times, a tricky section where both brothers needed to coordinate perfectly. For a breathless moment, it seemed Ethan might rush ahead too quickly, but Liam gave him a quick glance, and somehow they found each other in the music again. Near the back of the auditorium, a woman wiped away a tear. Beside her, a teenager who had been scrolling on his phone throughout previous performances slipped the device into his pocket, his attention fully captured. The brothers were no longer aware of the audience. They had entered that special place that musicians sometimes find, where nothing exists but the music itself. Ethan's face was turned slightly upward, his eyes half closed as if listening to something only he could hear. Liam's expression was one of intense focus that occasionally broke into a smile when they navigated a difficult passage successfully. As they approached the final section of the song, Liam encountered the part they had been forced to modify because of the broken piano string at home. For a second, confusion flickered across his face. The piano here had all its strings intact, and he had to quickly remember which version to play. He chose the original unmodified melody, a split-second decision that showed how much he had grown as a musician. The song ended with a gentle series of notes that faded away like the last light of sunset. For a moment, the auditorium was completely silent. The boys sat still, hands resting on the keys, not quite believing they had made it through the whole piece. Then the applause began, scattered at first, then building into a wave that washed over the stage. People stood up, still clapping, their faces bright with genuine appreciation. Mr. Rivera returned to the stage, shaking his head in amazement as he raised the microphone back up to his height. "Well, I think we're all a bit speechless after that," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "Liam and Ethan Wilson, everyone." The boys remembered their rehearsed bow, sliding off the bench and standing side by side. Ethan, overcome with excitement, added a little jump and wave that made the audience laugh delightedly. Liam, though still shy, stood taller than he had when they first walked on stage, his face flushed with pride. As they made their way backstage, Other performers patted their shoulders and whispered congratulations. The high school rock band they had admired earlier gave them thumbs up, and one of the ballet dancers pressed a small candy into each of their hands. "You were amazing," she told them. "I'm 16 and I still get too nervous to play that well." In the waiting area, May wrapped them in a tight hug while Robert beamed with pride. Abby, who had been filming the performance on her phone, showed them the screen. "Look, you guys got a standing ovation. That hardly ever happens at these things." Mrs. Thompson arrived a few minutes later, her eyes suspiciously bright. "That," she said simply, "was everything music should be." The rest of the talent show continued, but the boys' performance had left a lasting impression. During the intermission, several people sought out the Wilson family to compliment the young musicians. The principal of the elementary school Liam attended spoke with May and Robert about the school's music program. A local piano store owner offered to tune their home piano for free. Most surprising was a woman who introduced herself as the director of the county youth orchestra. "We don't usually accept children under 8, she explained, "but exceptional talent sometimes calls for exceptions. We'd love to have Liam audition for our beginners group." "What about Ethan?" Liam asked immediately, protective of his little brother. The director smiled. "We've never had a 4-year-old before, but after what I heard today, perhaps we could arrange something special." By the time the final act finished and prizes were being announced, both boys were fighting to keep their eyes open. The excitement, nerves, and emotional release of performing had left them exhausted. Ethan had climbed into Robert's lap, his head nestled against his father's chest while Liam leaned heavily against May's side. They were almost asleep when Mr. Rivera called their names again. "The Audience Choice Award, voted on by everyone here tonight, goes to Liam and Ethan Wilson for their piano performance." Startled awake, the boys made their way back to the stage, this time with their parents accompanying them. They were presented with a small trophy. Nothing fancy, just a plastic piano on a wooden base. But to them, it might as well have been solid gold. "Would you like to say something?" Mr. Rivera asked, lowering the microphone once more. Liam looked at Ethan, silently offering him the chance to speak, but the younger boy suddenly turned shy, burying his face against May's leg. With a deep breath, Liam stepped forward. "Thank you," he said simply. "Playing piano makes us happy, and we're glad it made you happy too." The crowd applauded again, charmed by the straightforward gratitude. As the family left the stage, Mrs. Thompson intercepted them near the exit. "This is just the beginning," she told the boys, her voice filled with certainty. "Music will take you places you can't even imagine yet." On the drive home, both boys fell asleep in the car, the trophy cradled between them on the back seat. May turned around to look at them, their small faces peaceful in the glow of passing streetlights. "Do you think Mrs. Thompson is right?" she asked Robert quietly. "About this being just the beginning?" He glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping sons. "I think," he said slowly, "that they've found something special. Whether it takes them somewhere or just enriches their lives, it's a gift either way." The next morning, the boys woke early, eager to tell each other about the dreams they'd had, dreams filled with music and applause. They raced to the piano before breakfast, playing snippets of What a Wonderful World and giggling at the memory of their big night. The trophy sat on top of the piano now, next to the fading photograph of Grandmother Rose. Something about the arrangement felt right, a connection between past and future, between the woman who had brought music into their home and the boys who had given it wings. Later that day, while the family was eating lunch, the phone rang. Robert answered, his expression changing from curiosity to surprise as he listened. "That was Mr. Chen from next door," he said after hanging up. "Apparently his nephew works at the local news station. They heard about the boys' performance last night and want to do a short feature on them for the evening news." May's eyes widened. "The news, really?" Abby was already checking her phone. "It's not just that," she said, turning the screen to show them. "Someone posted a video of their performance online last night. It's already got hundreds of views and comments." The adults exchanged looks of amazement and a hint of concern. This was moving faster than any of them had expected. Liam seemed overwhelmed by the news, while Ethan, not fully understanding, simply asked if they could play more piano. "One step at a time," May said gently. "Let's enjoy this moment before we think about what comes next." But as they gathered around the piano again that afternoon, it was clear that something had changed. Their living room still looked the same, The worn couch, the family photos, the sunlight streaming through faded curtains. But the world outside had started to take notice of the unexpected talent blooming within these walls. For Liam and Ethan, though it was still just about the joy of playing, of creating something beautiful together, as their small fingers danced across the keys, they remained, for a little while longer at least, simply two brothers who had discovered the magic of music, unaware that their first steps into the spotlight were about to lead them on a journey beyond anything they could imagine. The day of the news crew's visit dawned bright and clear. May had been up since sunrise, tidying the already clean house while Robert tried to fix the wobbly leg on the coffee table that had never bothered anyone until now. Upstairs, Abby was helping the boys choose which outfits to wear, vetoing Ethan's superhero t-shirt in favor of something more presentable. "But I play better when I'm a superhero," Ethan protested, clutching the shirt to his chest. Liam, more aware of the significance of being on television, had already picked out his nicest button-down shirt. "Maybe you can wear the superhero one underneath," he suggested, always looking for middle ground, like a secret identity. This compromise satisfied everyone, and by 9 o'clock the family was ready, at least on the outside. Inside, butterflies were doing acrobatics in every stomach. Even Pepper the cat seemed to sense the unusual tension, weaving nervously between legs and meowing more than usual. "Remember," Robert told the boys as they waited, "just be yourselves." That's what people liked at the talent show, not just the music, but you two playing it together. At precisely 10, a van with the local news station's logo pulled up outside. The boys pressed their faces to the living room window, watching as a small team unloaded cameras and equipment. Mrs. Thompson arrived moments later, having been invited to provide context about the boys' musical education. "Just 3 people," May said with relief as she peeked out. She had imagined a whole film crew invading their modest home. The reporter was a friendly woman named Ms. Rivera. No relation to the talent show host, just a coincidence that made the boys giggle. She had a warm smile and crouched down to the boys' level when she introduced herself. The cameraman, a tall man with a beard, showed Ethan how the camera worked, letting him look through the viewfinder. The sound technician, quiet but kind, attached small microphones to everyone's collars, which Ethan declared made them all look like spies. "We'll keep this simple and relaxed," Ms. Rivera explained. "First, I'd like to film you boys playing, then we'll do a short interview and maybe get some shots of you just being yourselves around the house." The boys nodded, suddenly serious. Liam whispered something in Ethan's ear that made the younger boy stand up straighter, putting on what their family called his big boy face. "What would you like us to play?" Liam asked politely. "What a wonderful world, of course," Ms. Rivera smiled. "That's what everyone's talking about. But we'd also love to hear anything else you enjoy playing." As the cameraman set up near the piano, Mrs. Thompson took a moment with the boys, helping them adjust the bench and reminding them of their posture. "Just like our practice sessions," she told them. "Forget the camera is there." When everything was ready, Ms. Rivera nodded to the cameraman, who gave a thumbs up. "Whenever you're ready, boys." Liam and Ethan exchanged their special look, and then Liam counted softly. 1, 2, 3. Their fingers touched the keys, and the familiar melody filled the room. Something magical happened as they played. The nervousness that had filled the house all morning seemed to dissolve. The camera, the microphones, the strangers watching, it all faded away, leaving just the music and the two brothers creating it together. Ms. Rivera, who had interviewed countless people in her career, found herself blinking back unexpected tears. The cameraman, usually focused solely on his framing and lighting, paused for a moment, caught in the spell of the music. Even the sound technician, who had worked on big city orchestral recordings, was visibly moved. When the boys finished playing, there was a moment of silence before the adults remembered to applaud. Ethan beamed, his earlier shyness forgotten, while Liam ducked his head with a small, proud smile. "That was beautiful," Ms. Rivera said, her professional demeanor softening. "Now could you play something else for us? Anything you'd like?" The boys huddled together for a quick conference. Then Ethan announced, "We're going to play the song we're working on for Mrs. Thompson's spring recital." It was a cheerful Mozart piece that they had just begun learning, more complex than What a Wonderful World, and showcasing their growing skills. As they played the second piece, the camera captured something even more special. The visible communication between the brothers. A quick glance here, a subtle nod there, the way they sensed each other's timing without words. It was like watching a dance where the partners anticipated each other's movements perfectly. After the music portion was complete, Ms. Rivera sat with the family for interviews. She had prepared typical questions about how long the boys had been playing and their future plans, but she quickly realized this story went deeper than child prodigies playing piano. "What do you think makes your son's music special?" she asked May and Robert. The parents exchanged glances, considering the question. "I think," Robert said slowly, "it's that they play from their hearts. They haven't learned to be afraid of making mistakes yet, or to worry about what people will think." May nodded. "And they have this connection. They've always had it, even before the piano. They understand each other in a way that's almost like they share one mind sometimes." Mrs. Thompson added her professional perspective. "In technical terms, what they're doing is remarkable for their ages. But technique can be taught. What can't be taught is the emotional quality they bring to the music. That's a rare gift." The boys, sitting together on the couch for their interview, answered questions with the unpredictable charm of young children. Liam was thoughtful and a bit shy, while Ethan bounced with excitement, sometimes answering questions no one had asked. "Do you get nervous when you play for people?" Ms. Rivera asked them. Liam nodded seriously. "My tummy feels like it's full of jumping frogs." "I don't get nervous," Ethan declared, then reconsidered, "except when I forget where my fingers go. Then I look at Liam and he helps me remember." "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" "A pianist," Liam said without hesitation. "And maybe someone who builds pianos too, so I can fix them when they break." Ethan's answer was less expected. "I want to be a piano-playing astronaut," he said firmly, "so I can play music for the stars." The final part of the filming captured the boys just being themselves, playing with toys, helping May bake cookies, a slightly messy process that made for charming footage, and showing off their small collection of books about musicians. Throughout it all, their natural brotherly bond was evident. The way Liam helped Ethan reach things on high shelves, how Ethan made his older brother laugh with silly faces when Liam got too serious. As the news crew packed up their equipment, Ms. Rivera spoke quietly with the parents. "This will air tomorrow evening on the 6 o'clock news. It's just a short segment, about 3 minutes, but..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think it might get attention beyond our local area. There's something special here." After the van drove away, the family collapsed on the couch, emotionally drained but excited. "You boys were wonderful," May told them, pulling them close for a hug. "Is our piano song really going to be on TV?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide. "Yes, buddy." Robert ruffled his hair. "You're going to be on TV. Will everyone in the whole world see us?" Liam's question held a note of worry. "Not the whole world," Abby reassured him. "Just people in our town." But Abby's prediction would prove to be wrong. The next evening, the family gathered around their television to watch the news. The boys' segment came near the end of the broadcast, introduced by the anchor with a warm smile. And now for something special, musical magic from the most unexpected performers. The 3-minute feature was beautifully done. Ms. Rivera's narration was understated, allowing the boys' music and personalities to shine through. The camera work captured both the technical skill of their playing and the emotional connection between them. Most touching was a slow-motion shot of their faces as they played, Liam's expression of deep concentration occasionally breaking into wonder, and Ethan's pure joy, his eyes sometimes closing as if feeling the music in his very soul. "That's really us," Ethan whispered as they watched, awestruck by seeing themselves on television. "You look like real musicians," Abby told them, and for once there was no teasing in her voice, just genuine pride. What the family didn't expect was what happened next. By morning, their phone was ringing constantly. The local station had uploaded the segment to their website, and someone had shared it on a popular social media platform. By lunchtime, the video had thousands of views. By dinner, it had reached hundreds of thousands. Comments poured in from around the country, then from around the world. "Those little boys play with more feeling than musicians. I've paid to see in concert. The way they look at each other while playing, that's what music is all about. I was having the worst day until I saw this. Thank you for reminding me there's still pure joy in the world." The family's quiet life suddenly wasn't quiet anymore. A national morning show called, wanting to feature the boys. A famous pianist sent a personal message of encouragement. The prestigious Lambert School of Music reached out about scholarship opportunities. Through it all, Robert and May tried to maintain normalcy. The boys still had bedtimes and chores. Liam still had regular school, and Ethan still attended preschool 3 mornings a week. Piano practice remained part of their daily routine, though now it carried a different weight. "I don't want them to feel pressured," May confided to Mrs. Thompson during an emergency meeting in their kitchen. "They're still so young." Mrs. Thompson nodded, understanding the concern. "The most important thing is to preserve their joy in music. Once that becomes work or obligation, something precious is lost." Together they crafted a plan. The family would accept only a few of the many opportunities coming their way. They would prioritize the boys' education and development as well-rounded children, and most importantly, they would make sure that music remained a source of happiness, not stress. When Robert and May sat the boys down to explain the changes happening around them, they were surprised by their reactions. Liam, usually the more serious one, seemed excited by the possibilities. "Could we play in a real concert hall someday?" he asked, eyes shining. Ethan had a simpler request. "Can I still wear my superhero shirt under my nice clothes when we play?" The parents exchanged relieved glances. Despite the whirlwind of attention, their boys were still just children who loved making music together. That night, after the boys were asleep, Robert found May sitting at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys without playing. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I'm just wondering where all this will lead," she said softly. "A month ago, we were just an ordinary family. Now," Robert placed his hand over hers, "we're still us. The boys are still them. The music was always inside them. Now they're just sharing it with more people." As if to emphasize his point, a sleepy Ethan appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "I had a dream about playing piano on the moon," he mumbled. The stars were clapping. May smiled, lifting him onto her lap. "That sounds like a wonderful dream." "It was," Ethan yawned. Liam was there too. "We were playing for Grandma Rose." Something about the simple statement brought tears to May's eyes. Amid all the excitement and attention, this was what truly mattered. 2 brothers making music that connected them to each other, to their family, and to something larger than themselves. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But tonight, in the quiet of their home with their sleepy child between them, they were simply a family brought closer by an unexpected gift of music. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the grand concert hall, making dust motes dance in the air like tiny stars. The space was empty except for a piano on stage, and a small group of people gathered in the front row. Liam and Ethan stood center stage, looking impossibly tiny in the vast space with its soaring ceiling and hundreds of empty velvet seats stretching back into shadow. "This is where you'll be playing next month," explained Mr. Walsh, the director of the Regional Youth Music Festival. He was a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses who had personally invited the boys after seeing their viral video. "What do you think?" Ethan's mouth hung open as he stared up at the sparkling chandeliers. "It looks like a castle for music," he declared. Liam, now 8 years old, was more practical. "The piano is bigger than ours," he observed, eyeing the gleaming grand piano with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It's one of the finest in the state," Mr. Walsh confirmed. "Would you like to try it?" The boys needed no further invitation. They climbed onto the bench together, adjusting their positions with the easy familiarity of musicians who had played side by side countless times. Their parents watched from the front row, May gripping Robert's hand tightly. Beside them sat Mrs. Thompson, who despite her age had insisted on coming to this important rehearsal. 6 months had passed since the talent show that had changed everything. 6 months of carefully navigating opportunities while trying to maintain a normal childhood for 2 boys who were suddenly in demand. They had appeared on 2 national television shows, been featured in a popular online magazine, and received more invitations to perform than they could possibly accept. May and Robert had turned down most offers, especially those that would have required extensive travel or interference with school. Mrs. Thompson had been their guide through these decisions, her decades of experience helping them distinguish between opportunities that would nurture the boys' talent and those that would exploit it. The Youth Music Festival had been an easy yes. It was prestigious but educational in focus. bringing together talented young musicians from across the region for a weekend of performances and workshops. The boys would play a 10-minute set on the festival's opening night, then participate in classes and activities with other musically gifted children. As Liam and Ethan's fingers touched the keys of the concert grand piano, the rich sound filled the hall with a depth and resonance their home piano could never produce. They began with scales to warm up, then launched into their festival piece, a more complex arrangement of What a Wonderful World that Mrs. Thompson had helped them develop, incorporating elements of classical technique while preserving the emotional quality that had captured so many hearts. Mr. Walsh listened with his eyes closed, nodding occasionally. When they finished, he opened his eyes and smiled broadly. "That was lovely, boys. The acoustics in here are different from what you're used to. The sound travels differently. Let's try again. But this time, play as if you're telling the story to someone sitting in the very last row." They played again, this time with more projection. Ethan, now 5 years old and still full of boundless energy, added unexpected flourishes that made Mr. Walsh raise his eyebrows in surprise and delight. Liam, growing more confident with his technical skills, provided a steady foundation that allowed his brother's creativity to soar. After several more run-throughs with adjustments for the space, they took a break. The boys ran up and down the aisles of the concert hall, burning off energy while the adults talked. "They've grown so much as musicians," Mr. Walsh commented. "It's remarkable for their ages." Mrs. Thompson nodded, pride evident in her face. "They practice every day, not because anyone makes them, but because they love it. That's the true gift, the joy they find in music. And in playing together," May added, watching her sons chase each other around the empty seats. "They're each other's best teachers. After the rehearsal, they stopped for ice cream on the way home, a tradition after important performances or practices." As the boys debated the merits of different flavors, a woman at a nearby table kept glancing their way. Finally, she approached somewhat hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but are you the Wilson brothers from that piano video? My daughter watches it every night before bed. She started piano lessons because of you." The boys looked to their parents, still unsure how to handle recognition from strangers. Robert nodded encouragingly. "Yes, we're Liam and Ethan," Liam said politely. "We're glad your daughter likes music." The woman's face lit up. "Would you mind if I took a quick photo to show her? She'll be so excited." After getting the parents' permission, she snapped a picture of the boys with their ice cream cones, thanked them profusely, and returned to her table. This kind of interaction had become increasingly common in their lives. People recognizing them at the grocery store, at school events, even at the dentist's office. "You're like superheroes," Abby had told them once. "But instead of fighting bad guys, you make people happy with music." Ethan had taken this comparison very seriously, and now often insisted on wearing his cape during practice sessions at home. The month leading up to the festival was busy with preparations. The boys' elementary school proudly announced their upcoming performance in the weekly newsletter. Liam's classmates, initially skeptical of his newfound fame, became impressed when they realized he would be playing in the same concert hall where many of their parents had attended symphony performances. Meanwhile, Ethan's kindergarten teacher used his accomplishments to encourage other students to find their own talents. "Everyone has something special they can do," she told the class. "Ethan's happens to be piano, but we're all good at different things." This perspective helped normalize the situation for both boys, who sometimes struggled with the attention they received. Liam, especially, had worried about being seen as different from his friends. One week before the festival, an unexpected package arrived at their home. It contained 2 handsomely bound books of sheet music and a note from the famous pianist who had reached out months ago after seeing their video. "For 2 young musicians who remind me why I fell in love with playing," it read. "Music is a lifelong journey. Enjoy every step." The boys pored over the books with excitement, already picking out pieces they wanted to learn next. Their musical horizons were expanding rapidly under Mrs. Thompson's guidance. While they still played their signature song at every performance, they were now exploring classical compositions, jazz arrangements, and even writing simple original pieces. The night of the festival arrived with a flurry of activity. Matching outfits were ironed, special bow tie clips were attached. Ethan had refused the regular kind, claiming they choked him, and hair was combed with extra care. Grandmother Rose's photograph was carefully wrapped and placed in May's purse, a talisman they brought to every performance. Backstage at the concert hall was a bustle of activity. Young musicians ranging from elementary school age to high school seniors tuned instruments, reviewed sheet music, or paced nervously. The boys were scheduled to perform third in the program, following a teenage violinist and a middle school wind ensemble. Mrs. Thompson found them in the green room, where Liam was helping Ethan adjust his bow tie clip for the 5th time. "Remember," she told them, crouching to their eye level, "music isn't about being perfect. It's about sharing something beautiful with others, just like you've always done." They nodded solemnly, then broke into identical grins when she handed them each a small chocolate coin, another of their pre-performance traditions. From the stage, they could barely see the audience beyond the bright lights, but they knew their family was sitting in the 3rd row center. The hall was full, with nearly 1,000 people gathered to celebrate young musical talent. As the applause for the previous performers faded, the MC introduced them. "Our next performers have captivated millions online with their remarkable musical connection. Please welcome Liam and Ethan Wilson, performing their signature arrangement of What a Wonderful World." The spotlight found them as they walked hand in hand to the piano. They climbed onto the bench, adjusted their positions, and exchanged their special look. Then, as naturally as breathing, they began to play. The piece had evolved since they first performed it at the talent show a year ago. It was more sophisticated now, showcasing their growing skills, but it retained the emotional quality that had touched so many. In the hushed concert hall, their music told a story of discovery, of brotherhood, of finding joy in creating something beautiful together. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the audience erupted in applause. The boys stood and bowed as they had practiced. Then, in an unplanned moment, Ethan grabbed his brother's hand and held it high, like victorious athletes. The audience laughed delightedly at the spontaneous gesture. Backstage, they were met with congratulations from other young musicians and festival organizers. A girl about Liam's age who would be performing a cello piece later in the program told him shyly, "You made my mom cry." In a good way. The rest of the festival weekend was filled with new experiences. The boys attended workshops where they met other musically gifted children, some of whom became instant friends. They participated in a masterclass with a renowned piano instructor who praised their natural musicality while giving gentle suggestions for technical improvement. They even joined an impromptu jam session where young musicians from different backgrounds shared their favorite pieces. On the final day, all participants gathered for a group photo on the concert hall steps. Liam and Ethan stood in the front row, beaming with pride at being part of this community of young musicians. For perhaps the first time, they didn't feel different or unusual. They were simply among peers who shared their passion. As they drove home, tired but happy, Ethan fell asleep in his booster seat, still clutching the festival program. Liam stayed awake watching the scenery pass by his window. "What are you thinking about?" May asked, noticing his reflective expression in the rearview mirror. "Mrs. Thompson says we're going to keep getting better if we practice," he said. "And there's so much music we haven't played yet." Robert smiled at the road ahead. "That's right. This is just the beginning of your musical journey. I think I want to write my own music someday," Liam continued. "Songs that make people feel happy, like What a Wonderful World does." Later that evening, after both boys were tucked into bed, May found a drawing Ethan had made at the festival. It showed 2 stick figures sitting at a giant piano, with music notes floating above them like stars. At the bottom, in wobbly kindergarten handwriting, he had written, "Me and Liam making the world wonderful." She pinned it to the refrigerator next to the festival program and the newspaper clipping about their performance. Their kitchen walls were becoming a gallery documenting this unexpected journey, from 2 little boys discovering an old piano to young musicians finding their place in the world. Outside their home, people would continue to share their video, comment on their performances, and wonder what the future held for the talented Wilson brothers. Record companies would eventually call. Opportunities for specialized education would arise. The path ahead would hold both challenges and triumphs, but within these walls, they remained simply Liam and Ethan, Brothers who had discovered that when they played together, they could create something greater than either could alone. Their story wasn't about child prodigies or viral fame. It was about two ordinary boys who found joy in music and, in sharing that joy, reminded others what made the world truly wonderful.